Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Music Meltdown. It has been a minute since I recorded one of these. Haven't really done a full episode since Death Cab, and I'm getting back into things without any of my typical hosts. I brought back Vanessa and Tom to go ahead and talk about legendary heavy alt rock band Dinosaur Jr., Jay Mascis, and some other guys' bands. Really just in I don't know if I'd say influential, but a really impressive group with a pretty large and varied discography. That's not true. That's not true. All right, let's just roll with it. We're already midway through. Tom, talk about Dinosaur Jr. Smile.
Okay. Uh, yeah, Dinosaur Jr. are an interesting band. I think Lou Barlow would probably take offense at you saying Jay Mascis and some other guys, but that's fine. I think they are really interesting because they have three pretty distinct phases, I would say. Um, which, yeah, of course, Lou Barlow is out of the band. We'll get into that after the third album and then came back for the reunion stuff. But yeah, going into this, I knew from You're Living All Over Me to Farm. So I had only not heard four of these. So most of this was reminding myself of my opinions, but some things did switch around, which was interesting. So
I figure I'll go next. I knew the entire classic period, well, extended classic period, because I knew the debut too. I knew the debut up to Hand It Over. And from there, I just didn't really have any inclination to listen to any of them past Beyond and just never got around to it. Really interesting group. Big fan of, I think the drummer's name is Murph, which is known on all of them. So yeah, big Murph fan. Sorry, Murph.
Well, I got into the first few probably, I don't know, 15 or so years ago. But for whatever reason, I always had a blockage against the ones after Lou Barlow left. Like I was very firmly Team Lou for a long time. And like I was really into Sebadoh, but like, I don't know, like, and I'm not even sure where I got that idea from. Like, I don't know if it was the internet or if it was magazines or what, or just people I knew, but I know I'd listened to some of those early 90s ones a couple times because when I went back to them, I was like, oh yes, I've heard this before. But I don't know. I mostly knew the first three the best, I would say, going into this. And the reunion, I don't know. I just never paid attention to the fact that they reunited.
You really didn't hold that love for Lou then, did you?
I guess not.
Man, we're less than like 5 minutes in, and you guys are already fawning over Lou Barlow, and I forgot his name. This is a good indicator of things to come.
So I did say that four of these I did not know going in, and one of those albums is at the bottom, which probably isn't much surprise. And it is their 2016 album, Give a Glimpse of What You're Not. Um, I wasn't expecting those faces already. Okay. Um, so I think this was the point for me where binging these albums kind of got a bit much. So they are. This is definitely a mellower album, I suppose, than I Bet on Sky, which is fine. Um, Going Down is a decent opener. I think it starts the album quite well. I think Tiny is quite a sweet little song. I quite like the vocal melody there. But then, like, I don't know, Be Apart has a cool guitar intro, but I find the song pretty bland. This feels like their most uninspired album songwriting wise to me. Um, and yeah, the production really lacks the punch that I enjoy out of Dinosaur Jr. You'll probably see that reflected in a lot of the albums, nearer the bottom being the less sort of punchy ones and the more mellower ones. um, and yeah, I don't know. I like it's okay. It's like as a worst album of 12 albums, it's decent. I'd probably go 3 stars on this. I just there's nothing from this album that I took away. Like I listened to it and it was in one ear out the other, basically. Um, and I liked the albums surrounding it better. So 3 stars, give a glimpse of what you know.
Wow, that's interesting. Okay, I figure I'll follow up next, and wow, let me just say, I don't get the production issue because literally all of these reunion records sound the same, and they lack pretty much any of the punch that stuff like Where You Been had. They're all so much more mellow than some of the '90s stuff, and I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but I don't get how you're singling out that one.
It's
Um,
like I agree with compared to the 90s stuff, like, but relatively that one felt even more like relaxed and mellow than the other ones to me anyway.
Fair enough. At my bottom, this was when binging really started to hit me. I'm going farm. Let's be honest. This is a Dinosaur Jr. record. And I'm going to say that about a lot of these because, yeah, they have a very distinctive sound. And aside from a couple of moments on a couple of records, I'd say that they stick pretty true to that sound a lot of the time. This one is very by the books, but I'd say this one leans a little bit heavier into their classic rock influences and Jay Mascis's playing. There's some really good stuff here. Pieces is really good. I Want You to Know, Plans, as well as Said the People. But there is an incredibly massive issue with this record. It's way too long. Why is this an hour long? It's the shortest song on the record is just over 3 minutes, and the longest is nearly 9. And just as a full listening experience, I think it's their most difficult and incredibly draining compared to some of their other records. And with the highs not being as high as certain other records as well, I can't really say that much great about it. I still don't think that it's bad. I don't think a Dinosaur Jr. have anything resembling a bad record. It's decent. It's 3 stars. But if you would have trimmed like 20 minutes, it may have been better. No Dinosaur Jr. record should be an hour long.
So I thought there was an obvious bottom, but clearly not. So my bottom is the debut. Um, I don't know. They weren't fully formed here. This album, it's just kind of like Dinosaur Jr. to me. Um, the cover art reminds me actually of early T-Rex, like the Tyrannosaurus Rex kind of vibe, but the music does not, obviously. But the cover art, so I don't know. It's it's punkier, but at that point they're kind of trying to lean into the hardcore sound, and hardcore is pretty well over by 1985. And I think they're trying to kind of the original wave of hardcore, yes. Most of the original wave of hardcore bands had moved on to other things like Black Flag, and a lot of those other bands had moved into other sounds. And I think
Didn't
that's, pardon me?
didn't New Day Rising come out in 85?
Well, they're not, but they were moving away from hardcore at that point. They were adding more pop elements.
I mean, for sure, but
Yeah. Anyway, that we're not here to give a history lesson, but um, I think what they're trying to do here is do something similar to that, but they just kind of weren't ready for it. I don't know. And like, I don't think it's bad. I see a lot of really low ratings for it, and like, I don't think that, but I just don't think they quite got into their sound yet. And they were trying, and you can see glimpses of it, like the song I'd say like Cats in a Bowl. They kind of you hear a little bit of it, and but they also kind of sound like the Minutemen there too a little bit. So it's they're still trying to integrate those influences into their own sound. Um, but you see it, and like things like Does It Float, that kind of that leans more into more of the hardcore sound, and I just don't think it quite suits them. So I don't know. It's 3 stars for me. I don't it's a formative album, but and it's more historically interesting to me than it is enjoyable as a listen, I guess.
Yeah, that makes
wow.
sense.
I thought for sure you were going to have that higher than me and Tom.
Yeah, yeah. I thought you were going to be the highest on that one, but I think
Yeah.
it's interesting that we all bottom out on 3 stars because I feel like that's the base. I think it was someone on Rate Your Music who said the baseline for any album where Jay Mascis plays guitar on it is a 3 star album, which is
Yeah.
That's
like,
accurate.
yeah. My number 11 is going to be the debut Dinosaur, which I'm going to have a string of albums that I feel very similarly about for a while now. This is 3.5 stars. I think it's pretty good. It definitely gets points for being different than their other albums. It was it was weird when it started. I kind of thought, wow, this is very different to their sound they were doing literally an album later. And I thought that was initially quite cool. But I think Vanessa's right in saying that this isn't the sound for them. I don't think Jay's vocals fit this style much at all, really, compared to the alt rock they'll be doing later on. But there are some good songs. I think Forget the Swan is really cool. I think Cats in a Bowl has a great manic energy to it with some really, really cool bass parts, which I really enjoyed. Yeah, it's weird. It's like the playing would definitely improve by the next album, but it feels like the rhythm section on this album is pretty solid. It has this manic energy, which is quite interesting. And I think my favorite song on the album is actually Quest, which is the closing track, which is a nice sort of, I kind of think of it as like, Street Spirit to end the bends, right? Where it's like a sign of things to come in a sense. It's not as good as Street Spirit, but it's also a bonus track on my deluxe edition of Where You Been. And as an acoustic version, which he re-recorded in the 90s, which I think is quite a cool thing that they were still, it wasn't like they completely dismissed this album as if it never happened. So yeah, it's pretty cool. And yeah, I don't know, I'm not going to return to it really, but it's an interesting relic, I would say.
How are we living in a world where I have that higher than you both? I can barely call that stuff listenable half the time, and I think that record's really cool. Anyways, my next one, I'm talking about I Bet on Sky. And yeah, it's basically Farm, but shorter. This very much is when I feel like they're starting to retread a lot of the previous ground. And while their performances are still very good, lyrically, it's starting to come across a little uninspired to me. And the distortion just isn't at the level of those 90s records. And on this one, for me, it just feels so plain in comparison. My favorites were Don't Pretend You Didn't Know, Stick a Toe In, and I Know It So Well. I just feel like on a lot of these records, there isn't too much to talk about if you already know the established Dinosaur Jr. sound. It's another 3-star effort. It's a pretty decent record, but things get dramatically better from there.
So my number 11 is Farm. I kind of agree. That album is the only album I have absolutely no standout tracks written down for. Like it sounds like a Dinosaur Jr. album. I didn't dislike it. I liked it, but if I was going to pick one of their albums to listen to, it would be, I probably actually might listen to the debut ahead of it just to see, or just for the interest factor. But like, I don't know, like you said, it's too long. It's just not a very exciting album. I don't even really have that much to say about it. Like, and maybe I'm wrong. I didn't go back to it as much as some of the others, so that could be part of it. But the length was a bit of a deterrent, and the fact that I didn't take much out of it kind of just like, so I feel like it belongs where it is for just that reason too. So yeah, 3.5 on that one though, a low 3.5, like because it's still good enough. I don't know. It was a hard one I found because like I didn't dislike it at all. I liked it when I was hearing it, but it's right out of my head.
Yeah. We're kind of saying, apart from my bottom, which I didn't expect to be that controversial, we're kind of saying the same albums because my number 10 is Farm. I'm surprised people like this album so much. This is, especially on Rate Your Music, it's got like the same rating as Beyond. It's higher than like Green Mind and albums like that. And it's like, I don't see it. I kind of agree with a lot of what Vanessa said. However, I do think there are standout tracks. I think the opening track Pieces is great. They've always been great at opening tracks. They always nail, whenever I start a Dinosaur Jr. album, I'm straight in. Like it's never, I've got to get through this one. And then, some of their best tracks for me are opening tracks. I Want You to Know is okay, but again, they're kind of lacking ideas. I think they came back with Beyond and kind of did a lot. I was talking about Alice in Chains in another video, and it's kind of the same thing where they did Black Gives Way to Blue, and that was like, oh, okay, we've got some ideas for this reunion, and then they were like, we probably need to do more reunion albums, and it was more like out of obligation than anything else. But I think they do sort of find themselves a bit more with a couple of the later albums, which we'll get to, I suppose. I did write down Dinosaur Jr. by numbers, which, yeah, pretty much sums up the album, I think. Plans is one of the better songs on the album. I like the hook and the guitar work. Said the People is a really good sort of slow atmospheric track. Then there's just a blot of tracks in the middle that I do not remember a single note of. And I've listened to this album twice. So I do think it ends quite well. The last three songs are good. I just think there's clearly stuff you could have cut from this album, and then there's a whole listen that's quite tiring. So yeah, it's a 3.5 again, low 3.5. I kind of operate on a different scale to you guys, but that's fine. It kind of means the same thing from what we've been saying. So yeah.
Man, I'm stunned you got through that thing twice. I how I go about these, I feel like I did it differently than you both. What I do is I listen to all of the records chronologically. I do one listen, I write my notes down immediately, and I go strictly based off of how I felt then, as I don't want to give any records maybe a little bit more attention than the others, you know?
No, I did this. I only listened to it twice because I heard it before we did it, and I listened again for this. So
okay. Alrighty. Well, despite all of that, I'm not crazy. I'm talking about the debut now. I'm shocked I have this higher than anybody else. And I don't see the issues that people have with this record much at all. It notably, it is not very produced. It's a very lo-fi record compared to the rest of their offerings. But it's not in a way that it really kills the album. There's a lot of raw passion and energy contained on this one that you could argue they don't really always have because they're so slacker and whatnot. So it makes this one really interesting. Just from the opening track, stuff like Bulbs of Passion, which is actually a bonus track, but it's basically been incorporated into every version of the record now, so who cares? Forget the Swan, Cats in a Bowl, Does It Float, Mountain Man, and Quest. Those are all just great songs. I really enjoy them all a lot. The biggest issue with this record is some of them really blend into one another, and it kind of just becomes a harmonious mass of this sort of hardcore punk thing that they're going for, but it's always a fun thing. I have a lot of enjoyment listening to it. I don't know. It's weird because I don't really care for punk that much as a whole, but like this sort of thing, I'm really, at least when they're doing it and when certain other bands are doing it, I can get really into it. I don't know. There are a couple of weaker cuts here. I didn't like Pointless very much, as well as Severed Lips. But I think this is a pretty good record. I think that shows a ton of promise and what they would go on to do, and I'd happily go back to this. I'm going to give it 3.5 stars. It's a good record.
Well, I think it makes it a little more palatable because it's not super punk. Like it's got punk elements, but it's not straight ahead punk nor straight ahead hardcore at all. So that makes sense. So my number 10, and I don't know how controversial this one is, but it is Sweep It Into Space. I I don't know about this one. I don't know if it's just me, but the drums on this album kind of drove me insane. They just seemed super loud. I don't know if it was my speakers or what it was, but I didn't have that issue on any other album, and I used the same setup. So, and that really distracted me on the whole album. Like it really stopped me from being able to get into it as much as I wanted to. But even then, I found the songs they were kind of bland in a lot of cases. I don't know. It just did not do a lot for me. I didn't think Kurt Vile added that much to it, except for on a couple songs, maybe here and there, but I don't know. Because the thing about them is when they work with new people sometimes, and other examples, those people usually seem to add something unique to the album. And I just didn't feel that with this one, with him. Like, I don't know. It just, I don't know, maybe it was because it was at the end, but I don't see like they've seen a bit of hype for it, and I don't totally get it. But it's still 3.5. It's still good. There's still some good songs on it. Like I really liked I Ran Away, and Garden is a nice Lou Barlow track because sometimes his songs stand out and sometimes they don't on these later albums. But in this case, I think that one did. But yeah, the drum thing really, really took away from it for me. And I don't know if that's just me, but it just seemed like I couldn't stop noticing them once I noticed them. And this is the only album I had that problem with. So
Yeah, I didn't notice anything really distinctly wrong with the drums.
Yeah, interesting. I will not be talking about it yet, but I kind of see where you're coming from on that in some cases. My number 9, I don't think any of us has done anything too crazy yet. I'm just waiting for it. Someone's going to have something insane soon. But I'm going with I Bet on Sky, number 9. And again, basically echo what Adrian said in that it's a shorter version of Foam. That's a good thing because It shows a bit more restraint. I actually think, again, opening track, Don't Pretend You Didn't Know, not has some great strings on it, which I wasn't expecting, and then the piano comes in, and I just think it's a great change of pace for them. And when that song came out, I was like, oh wow, we're getting like something different. No, the rest of the album is just normal Dinosaur Jr., which is it's still good. It's still got incredible guitar solos. Watch the Corners is a track that gets a lot of hype, and I think it's good, but it's not my favorite on the album. Stick a Toe In is another song that's something. Again, when they do something different on these newer albums, it's not like a completely new style. It's just they tweak the style slightly. They add some new instruments. They change song structure a little bit, maybe, and that's enough to make the song stand out. Whenever they do that, I do appreciate it. I think Rude feels pretty out of place on the album. I appreciated that this one had some shorter songs because, like on Farm, all the songs are so long, and a lot of them don't need to be that long. And yeah, it closes well with See on Your Side. It's a bit more compact and varied than Farm, but I also don't think it's anything that special, especially like, again, if I would have heard this, in 2012, it might have been higher because I would have listened to it in the context of a load of 2012 albums, and then, it would have stood out a bit more. But when listening to them all in a row, this one didn't. It was good, but again, I'm not, apart from Don't Pretend You Didn't Know, I'm not going to reach for it very much. So 3.5 stars. Good album.
Okay, Tom, you were really setting me up for this one. We're about to get my big hot take. I want to apologize firstly. I don't have a conventional Dinosaur Jr. list. I'm going to the 90s, and Tom knows very well the record I'm going for. I'm going to Green Mine. Here's my issue with this record. I don't like the production at all. I think that this record, to me, comparatively to everything that came before it, this record feels almost very flat to me. It doesn't really do a ton at all. Like all of the songs, they aren't really doing anything that special. They're just sort of coming to me in the most sort of plain way that they could. I don't know. It's just sort of how I hear the record. The playing is still excellent, and you can hear them really starting to fully embrace the alternative rock here. Not that they weren't before, but this is when it sort of comes to the forefront, I feel. And there's still some absolutely great songs on here. Puke and Cry, Blowing It, How Do You Pin That on Me, Water, and Green Mine as well. Don't really care about Muck. And this is probably their biggest issue in their heyday. I feel like a lot of the tracks kind of blend on this one compared to other ones. It's a very one-note record compared to the other 90s ones. And even in some ways to You're Living All Over Me and Bug. And like I was saying, I just think that production-wise, it's suboptimal for what I want from this band. I don't think that it's bad. In fact, I think that this is still a very good album, and I have it at 4 stars. It's just, I comparatively to most things that came before it and what came after it, it just doesn't fully connect. I don't know. Lou Barlow is still great, though.
You kind of saved yourself with that last part of that review. Also, how can you not mention The Wagon as a standout track? That blows my mind.
Because all of them sound the same. All of the good ones are good, and Muck is bad. That's it.
Crazy.
Well, that's not what I'm going to talk about next. I'm going with I Bet on Sky as my number 9. But I kind of thought it was a little different. I don't know what it is about it. It did feel a little more fresh to me than some of the other ones that I'd heard, but it might have just been that Farm. I just didn't connect with that one. So when I heard this next, it sounded a little better, maybe because it was shorter, a little tighter. I don't know. It's still not great, obviously, up to the level of some of their other stuff, but like I agree that Don't Pretend You Don't Know is a great album opener, and I mean they always nail the album openers. But I do like Watch the Corners. Like I liked the chugging guitar sound on that one, and I liked the piano on Stick a Toe In. Like I made quite a few notes here of the songs, and I just felt a lot more excited about this album than Farm. So it made me excited for the rest of the discography because I was feeling a little burnt out at this point. Like going into this album, I was a bit like, oh my gosh. Because I was doing them kind of one a day chronologically first, and then kind of going back to them out of order to see if maybe that changed my opinion. And in some cases, it did make a difference. But yeah, and like there was one song, that Rude song, at the beginning of it, it reminded me of the Meat Puppets. It actually reminded me of a specific song called Lost. So that I thought that was kind of neat, just kind of a callback to the 80s. Yeah, it's a good album, 4 stars, a low 4 stars. Not much else to really say about it though.
Yeah, that's fair. And I'm gonna get right back at you for Green Mind because my number 8 is Without a Sound from 1994, which is going to be controversial here probably, but I think within a lot of circles it's not that controversial.
A lot of circles are damn wrong.
Let's get out of the way. Feel the Pain is a classic song, absolutely essential. It's one of those songs that defines the 90s for me, and I love it. I'm not saying anything bad about that song. I don't think so. The second track is also great. I love the guitar work on it, and it's a really great hook. And then it kind of falls off a cliff. The album, I don't really get how you can say that Green Mind sounds flat when this is one of the most sterile sounding albums that they put out. It's like the songwriting is good, and obviously I think this is one of the best guitar albums for them. There's a lot of variety in his solos, a lot of interesting licks and stuff. But yeah, I think other than those first 2 tracks, there wasn't much, and I've listened to it 3 times now because I wanted to give it a fair shot because I feel like with opening as well as Feel the Pain, and I don't think so. There must be something there, but for me, it isn't quite there. I prefer when they're doing their more sort of grungy, like pop centric stuff, and this sort of feels a bit, I don't know, quite uninspired is the word I would go for. Maybe the slacker nature takes over a little bit on this album. It kind of feels like they wrote Feel the Pain and then wrote the rest of the album because they needed an album to go with their big single. Seemed like the thing to do is also pretty cool. It runs a bit long for me though. On the Brink, I also like. And the song Get Out of This really just feels like it was a song that was like cut from an early 90s album. It's like it's okay, but it just pales in comparisons to some of the songs on Green Mind. For me, it's in that same kind of vein. So yeah, Without a Sound's my number 8. It's 3.5 stars still, but yeah, it's good, but I think they have much better, and it really doesn't live up to those first 2 tracks for me.
Well, I saw that one coming, so time to switch around my entire list to ruin you. Next up, I'm going to be talking about Where You Know. I'm talking about Give a Glimpse of What You're Not. I think it's pretty blatantly easier than the 2 records that came right before it. And I don't know, there still isn't much different about this record compared to I Bet on Sky and the other one. It's playing in very similar territory, but I much prefer the production on this record. I think it sounds dramatically better. And I think Jay is also vocally a lot better on this record. And I don't know, I like a lot of these late period records. I think that they're solid, but there isn't really a ton to say about them because they're kind of retreading what they were doing in the late 90s. But there's some really great stuff on it, like Going Down, Be Apart, Love Is, Good to Know, Lost All Day, Knocked Down, and maybe one of my favorite songs by them in general, Closer, Left Right, I thought was exceptional. I wish I had more to say about a lot of these later period Dinosaur Jr. records, but there just isn't a lot to say about them. Despite that, I still have it at 4 stars. I think it's a very good record, and I'll happily put it on again, but just not that compared to their peak efforts minus Green Mind. I think it doesn't compare.
Well, so I thought it was going to be the controversial one here, but I also have Without a Sound at number 8 because I don't know, it did grow actually a bit for me when I went back to it, but I found it super disappointing after the album that it came after the initial time I went through it. I agree that with Feel the Pain is a great song. And so I was like, all right, cool. And then it just kind of went down from there the first time around. But when I went back to it, there is more to appreciate about it. And one thing I will say about it is that I really like the unique quality that I don't know if I'm saying her name right, but Thalia Zedek adds to it. I think she adds, you can really tell she's there. She kind of adds something unique to it that I appreciated more the second time I went to it. So that was good. And like there are some cool songs on it. But it just for the time period that it was in, it's just not to the level that some of the other ones were. Um, yeah, like that's pretty well all I have to say about it, other than, there's the Out of Hand is a nice slower song. It's really pretty, really beautiful. Really liked that one. And Mind Glow is really cool, like the guitar on that, but I don't know. Didn't quite live up to some of the other albums around the same time. So it's still 4 stars though. Um, they've rated pretty well for me overall. So even the ones that were ranking fairly low were still good albums, still ones they would go back to, and maybe would get better with time too. Because I feel like a lot of their stuff is they're growers. Like you got to give them some time. So
Yeah, good to know that you're also sane. Good.
Insane.
For now.
Yeah, for now. Yeah. Speaking of insane, my number 7 is Sweep It Into Space, which I thought was the biggest surprise of the whole journey for me because I was really tied out. Obviously, I put Give a Glimpse at the bottom, and I was like, I'm feeling a bit exhausted by this. And then this album started, and I will agree with you, the production is not great. The production is definitely the worst thing about the album. I didn't notice the drum problem as much, but for me, as much as the production is important, I think that the songs on here are the strongest that they had of this, since Beyond, the strongest set of songs, as you can tell by where it's placed on the list. I Ain't, great opener. I love the guitar, and the lyrics actually feel a lot better on this album than the last couple. Last couple were just a lot of Jay recycling the same ideas, but this one felt a bit more interesting lyrically. I'm at the Stones is a fun little song, and then you have the 1-2 punch of Garden and I Ran Away. Garden's probably my favorite Lee Barlow vocal, I think, of the whole discography. And yeah, it has sort of like a lo-fi feel compared to the albums that came before it, which I appreciate. I think that is kind of cool. And Me kind of takes me back to the time of Green Mind, where they were sort of taking the guitar work and the melodies of The Cure and making it into this like grungy alt rock kind of style, which I appreciate in that track. Take It Back is another quite different song. It reminds me a bit of, I don't know if you guys heard the bonus tracks from Hand It Over, like the Pickle song. Really, definitely worth a listen. Very different for them. Take a Run at the Sun was another one of the bonus tracks. Like sort of piano led, really weird, like indie music with like almost no guitar on it. And that is what that song reminded me of, was the sort of the bonus tracks of that era. And obviously Hand It Over is one of their more sort of weird albums, so to speak. So it was cool to hear that. Walking to You is great. You Wonder is a really nice closer. I don't really know what it is about this album that really works for me, but it just does. And I really, really had a good time listening to it all the way through. Like it flows nicely from track to track. And I'm finally joining you in 4-star land with Sweep Into Space at number 7.
Well, alrighty, after we're finished with this, I'll make sure to go listen to the Pickle song. Anyways, next up, I don't know how controversial this one is. Apparently, according to Rate Your Music, like their second best album. And I just don't see it. I'm talking about Bug. This record very much feels like just a continuation of what they were doing on You're Living All Over Me. It's not bad, but it leans a lot more acoustic than it does electric, which to me, Tom and I very much disagree on this. I think that this record sounds a lot, I don't know if cleaner is the right term, but I think it sounds a lot, it's not as like noisy, it's not as over the top as I feel You're Living All Over Me is. It's not to the point to where the production team literally has to, not the production team, the record label literally has to ask if you meant to put this much distortion on your record, like what happened on the previous. But yeah, despite that, there's still plenty of very good songs on here. I really like Freak Scene, They Always Come, Yeah We Know, The Post, and Keep the Glove. They're all great. And most of the other songs are just a little bit below that. But oh, there is one song on this record that utterly blows. I don't like the song Don't at all. To me, it just sounds like an entire goddamn mess. I think it's pretty terrible and probably my least favorite song in the entire catalog. Not going to listen to that ever again. Now skip songs typically. Overall, yeah, it's still a very enjoyable, consistent record past Don't, and it's Dinosaur Jr. You're going to be in for at least a solid time on everything past fun. I give this one 4 stars. I think it's a very good record, but really a 3.68 on Rate Your Music. I don't get this being like their second best record overall.
Always been regarded as one of their classics. I think maybe because of the time period that it came in and like the influence. And both those albums were on SST Records, which was a big deal in the 80s alternative scene. Actually, I wore my SST shirt. I don't know if you can see it, but in honor of that. But yeah, I don't think the record company minded the distortion on anything there, that record company. But yeah, so my number 7 is Beyond. That album definitely another one that improved with me for me when I went back to it, because initially I just did not get the big deal about it at all. But when I went back to it, I was like, no, actually, this is really cool, especially when you contextualize like when it came out and the kind of what was going on with it, that they were bringing the whole band back together, and they were doing it 10 years later from their last solo J Mascis album, and almost 20 years from their last band effort. And it's a great effort. It's like it's the band going into the future, but it's not embarrassing like sometimes those efforts are. Sometimes the bands get back together and you're like, why are you doing this? Like, you really shouldn't be, but that's not the case here. They're bringing it into the new era. They sound revitalized. They sound great, and you can tell the band's back together. So it is a really great album. It just took me a little bit to realize that. And again, the opener is great, and yeah, just overall solid effort and good return. 4 stars.
Yeah.
Good for Murph.
My number 6 has just been mentioned. It's Bug from 1988, their third album. I will say 6 and 5 pretty interchangeable for me. This is a strong 4 stars. I think Freak Scene is probably my favorite Dinosaur Jr. song if I had to pick. I think it is fantastic. I love the lyrics. The sometimes I don't thrill you, sometimes I think I'll kill you. Just don't let me fuck up, will you? If I need a friend, it's still you. That's just some great lyrics right there. And the way it all drops out for that part and then comes back in, it's awesome. I love the acoustic section in the middle. I just think that's a killer song. And it kind of overshadows the rest of the record a little bit for me. Not massively, but when you love a song that much, it's hard for anything to live up to that. I think No Bones is really cool, really noisy track. Definitely not clean sounding at all, but that's fine. They Always Come has some great soloing, which really shines on this album. The Pond song kind of reminds me of Neil Young, which a lot of the acoustic tracks tend to, with that sort of high-pitched, piercing vocal. The Post has some really cool guitar as well. I do think more so than some of the other albums, this is the album where a lot of the songs tend to blend together for me, which isn't a bad thing because it's got a great sound. I would say Don't is also probably my least favorite on the album, but I don't hate it. I think it's okay. It's just not really. The reason I like Dinosaur Jr. is for the melodic, upbeat music, and that is like an apocalyptic nightmare by design. And it's cool, but I prefer listening to their more sort of accessible stuff. It's not my least favorite of the whole discography, but it's not my favorite on the album at all. So yeah, Bug's my number 6, and yeah, I don't know, probably Diehards would have it higher, but
Well, alrighty. My number 6 and 5 are also pretty interchangeable. I'm going to be knocking out the last two reunion records that I have left. These two are both very strong 4 stars. Really enjoyed both of them, and I'm going to be talking about Steph's album of the year from 2021 now, Sweep It Into Space. Very similar to Tom, I was very done with this. Fun fact, I listened to this like 2 hours ago because I really didn't want to do it because I was so done with this discography. They're not a band you can binge in this way. It just doesn't work. It's too much of the same thing. But this record kicks. 2021 was a great year, and this probably makes it into my like top 10. Oh, shut up, Tom. You're wrong. Anyways, yeah, but I really like the sound of this record. Really brought me back to like where you've been with the sort of heavy distortion, kind of well, heavy relative to the reunion records because the other reunion records don't sound heavy really at all. Um, yeah, a couple of songs to me had a little bit of like a metallic touch, which isn't really there often, but I definitely felt it a little bit. I love on Take It Back. I believe there was a heavy piano use, which really was just excellent. And overall, I think pretty much most of the songs on here are the best of the reunion. I Ain't is great. Same with To Be Waiting, Garden, Hide Another Round, Take It Back, and Say. And the ending 1-2 punch of Walking to You and You Wonder might be the best way that they've ended a record since Hand It Over. And I just think that this is a really dramatic step forward than all of the other reunion records, basically. It's very close between this and Beyond, but for me, I think I need to do a re listen to both. A strong 4 star record, though. Really enjoyable.
So I guess this is my huge hot take, this one. So number 6 is Give a Glimpse of What You're Not, which I hate the title because I always forget it. I had to look at it again because I never remember what the damn record's called. But I was really excited by this album. I thought it was really great. Like it had some great energy. I thought that the songs were catchier and punchier. Like, oh crap!
Duck.
Did you hear all that? I just had a whole bunch of sirens go
Every
by.
bit of it. It's okay. Just don't get caught.
Okay, I'll just start again.
No, just keep going. It's whatever. I don't care.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yes, I live on a very busy street. So where was I? So I would say that there's basically the best Lou Barlow song on this album of his Dinosaur Jr. output, which is Love Is. I loved that song. Um, I just found the album, I was really excited by it. I so when Tom said it was his last, I was like, oh, okay. Because I actually really want to get this one. I want to go back to it again. I've gone back to it a few times, and I just thought it was a really exciting record for me. All I could really say about it. I actually have it at 4.5 stars. Like I knew I'd heard some good things going into it, and I was expecting maybe it to be a bit of an upturn from the last couple, but I wasn't expecting to love it quite as much as I did. So
Yeah, don't worry. Tom's dead wrong about this being their last record. I think Burnout was really getting to him. I don't see how you can think this is worse than Farm.
Maybe I should revisit it. I don't know. It's cool that you like it so much. I'm not gonna scoff at Dinosaur Jr. Love, even if it's the wrong albums. That's fine. So my number 5, we are lining up in terms of our favorite reunion albums, Adrian, because my number 5 is Beyond. I think, yeah, you can tell Lee Barlow's back. Some great bass parts on this album. Man, the opening track on this album, Almost Ready, love it. So good. Some of my favorite Jay Mascis guitar parts on that song. So catchy. Such a great song to sort of like wake up to. You know, I like putting that song when I wake up to sort of get me ready for the day. And then it really doesn't let off. Crumble is great as well. Straight after that, it kind of reminds me of the song Out There from Where You Been a little bit in parts. There's some very similar guitar parts to that song, which it doesn't bother me that much because it's still a great song in its own right, but it's just something to note, I suppose. Pick Me Up is a great one as well. Back to Your Heart is a Lou Barlow vocal. And I think the Lou Barlow songs on this, I don't like that much. He kind of sounds a bit like Dave Grohl on this album. I think it's how his voice is like produced. To me, it just reminds me of like Wasting Light era Foo Fighters, which I know this predates that, but those songs, like when you're listening to Dinosaur Jr., which is obviously better than that to me anyway. Um, I don't want songs that sound like Wasting Light era Foo Fighters in the middle of the album. But yeah, that might just be a me thing. This Is All I Came to Do is a really fun, summery song. Been There All the Time has some insane drumming on it, and it's just fantastic. Maybe one of the best songs drum wise of the discography. We're Not Alone is a really lovely little tune as well. Lightning Bulb is a very interesting song. It kind of stands out from the rest of the album. It's a bit more sort of atmospheric. It kind of reminds me of post-punk of the 1980s a little bit, which I found quite interesting. And yeah, it's a really strong album with some great highlights. I think it does lack the consistency of the albums that I have above it, but yeah, another strong 4 stars for Beyond. I think it's a great album.
Yeah, I'm about to talk about that, but considering I never want to do the discography, I'll throw it out there. Wasting Light is the best Foo Fighters record. Anyways, yeah, Beyond is a really good record. After taking about 10 years from recording anything, to my knowledge, with Dinosaur Jr., it's shocking that they're able to get together and make such a really consistent record as this. I don't think any of the songs here are bad at all. They're all very, very good. The sound of this one it kind of feels like if you were gonna blend Without a Sound and Hand It Over. It's not as radio friendly as Without a Sound, but it's not as sort of experimental and weird as Hand It Over. It's like a really cool merging of the two, and I really like that sound. My biggest issue with it is I don't think that there's like an all-time great Dinosaur Jr. song in here. I think that everything here is very good. It's all pretty impressive, but I don't know if there's like one crazy standout. Almost Ready comes pretty close though. And I don't know. Like I'm saying, it's very consistent and incredibly well made, but I think that this is probably the one that suffered from me only doing one listen. I feel like this one and probably Give a Glimpse of What You're Not. I probably not that one. I meant to say Sweep It Into Space. Yeah, that one. I think that those are the ones that definitely could have improved upon further listening for me. But regardless, it's still a pretty strong 4 star record. Really good and pretty clearly one of the better of the reunion era. But yeah, really good.
So my number 5 is Bug. Um, yeah, it's kind of funny, its reputation. You kind of think it's going to be way better than it is. I mean, it's still great, but there is definitely better. But when I was first into Dinosaur Jr., this was kind of held up as one of the top tier albums for sure. So it's kind of why it was one of the only ones that I really bothered listening to. Freak Scene, of course, killer opener, killer song, one of their top songs for sure. And one thing I really noted about this is like I love how Jay Mascis integrates his guitar work and solos and stuff into the indie scene, which is where that wasn't really a big thing at that time. It wasn't really something a lot of people did. So it's kind of cool that he did that at that time. Um, I think there's lots of great songs on here though. And as you get to know them better, they stick with you more. Like when I was going back to it, I hadn't heard it in years, I don't think, in full. And I still remembered all these songs. I still really liked hearing them again. And it was like, oh yeah, this song's great. And, you know, and I don't hate Don't. It kind of actually reminds me of early Sonic Youth and the anguish, the fact that he gets Lou Barlow to say, "Why don't you like me?" and such like the anguish. You can, it's like you can feel it. It's and knowing sort of the history where they or the lore, I guess we should say about them not getting along at that time. It just makes it a little more chilling, I guess. So I don't know. I really like this album. It's 4.5 stars for me. It's not as catchy as You're Living All Over Me, but I still think it has some good hooks. So, and it's another grower, I think, too, like a lot of their stuff.
Yeah, take that, rate your music. You're wrong.
Vanessa is full of surprises. I was sure that would be in your top 3, but interesting. Hey, surprises are fun. That's what makes these fun. Speaking of surprises, I'm kind of shocked I'm the first one mentioning. Well, I'm not that shocked, but I feel like viewers might be shocked that I'm the first one mentioning my number 4, Hand It Over, because of the reputation of this album, which is unfair. It is a great album, and I guess it's because it's different that people didn't click with it as much. This is definitely one that's risen. I think this probably would have been number 6 before I did all these re-listens, but it really, yeah, I'm really torn on the rating. I'm going to stick with 4 stars. I can't quite get to 4.5, and it's kind of like what you're saying about Beyond, is that there isn't a track on here that I go gaga for, but I love every song. Every song is great, but it lacks, like, it probably would have one song in my top 20 Dinosaur Jr. songs, to be honest, but it would probably, all of them would probably be in the top 50. So that's like where it's strange. Kevin Shields comes in to produce this one of My Bloody Valentine, and he does a great job. This is exactly what they needed after what I thought was quite a uninspired album in Without a Sound, was something different. More, I wouldn't call it a shoegaze album, but there's definitely that shoegaze influence through the production, which is quite cool, and dream pop and stuff like that. I think Never Bought It is one of my favorites on the album. I love the riff and the unique instrumentation for them. My one blot on the production is the trumpet on I'm Insane. I hate the way that sounds. It's terrible. Like, it's like Vanessa with the drums, right? On that one album. It was just, whenever I hear that song, it makes me irrationally angry, because it could just be like a lead guitar line, or like, if you're going to have horns on a song with just one single trumpet, it just sounds so thin and like weak. And it really, yeah, it's the one thing. That song on its own is good, but that kind of derails it a little bit for me. Can't We Move This is cool. Obviously, Alone is a fan favorite song for a good reason. It's sort of cacophony of fuzz guitar. It's very unique, even for them. With using so much fuzz guitar, this feels like a unique step for them. Shut It Over You is the one that reminded me of Neil Young the most, and I like Neil Young, so that was a good thing. Loaded is pretty good, and then the final 4 tracks are just gold dust. This album ends so well, with Mick with the great upbeat song with a great bass line. I Know You're Insane is my favorite on the album. I really like the country bounce of Getting Rough, and I like how eclectic the whole album is as well. And then ending on Gotta Know, it's really well sequenced, because that's a really good way to end it. Yeah, it's one of the most fun straight through listens to of their catalog for sure. But again, I think maybe I need more time with it for it to grow on me, because it is very different to their other stuff. I'm like this close to 4.5 on this. It pains me, but yeah, maybe one day, maybe on my next listen. But yeah, my number 4 is Handed Over at 4 stars.
I'm kind of surprised that you were surprised by Vanessa, because she's a pretty stable, sane person. She understands that Bug isn't one of the best Dinosaur Jr. records. Other people need to figure that out, but it's okay. I'm talking about the record that I suspect is going to be a lot higher for both of you. I'm talking about You're Living All Over Me Now. And I mean, come on, this is a blatant evolution from Dinosaur. It's still a really lo-fi production as well, but they are so far removed from punk on this one mainly. They keep a little bit of the hardcore, but punk is like entirely gone. You can tell that they're kind of helping to dictate their alt rock here, and while it isn't fully there, it's really blended into the sound that they have going on as well. My main issue with this record is I do think that this is one that suffers from track bleed. Some of them kind of, oh, bye, Tom. Some of the tracks kind of bleed a little bit for me. They're just sort of one note at points, but I don't complain about it because, pretty much every song is stellar. This is a really exceptional record. Only real weak cut on it for me is Polito. I just don't really get much from it one way or another. And it's a rather weak closer, but on most versions of the records that are out now, you get their amazing cover version of The Cure's Just Like Heaven, the definitive version of Just Like Heaven. Really just an exceptional song, in my opinion. This is a 4.5-star record. Jay Mascis is insane here. Lou Barlow not far behind him. Murph's having fun. But yeah, this is a really, really great record. Really enjoyed it.
All right. My number 4 is Green Mind. So I think this is really when they make the 90s the 90s. They're almost like bringing the 90s here before anybody else does, because it's 1991. It really expands on the sound of Bug, I think, and just brings a new flavor to it. The Wagon is a cool opener, of course. Those first few tracks, like Puke and Cry too, like all that first half of the album is just killer. Like you just go into it and you're just like, hell yeah, this is awesome. Like this is gonna be 5 stars. But it does kind of trail off a little bit near the end for me, but not in a bad way. Like it's not like a huge step down. It's just comparatively to that first half, it's like a little bit of a letdown. But I mean, not a huge one. I do think Green Mine is a great closing track, though. It's just kind of those few in between. I do think it signals a new direction for the band, of course, where Lou Barlow is gone. And it builds on the sound of the first two, like I said, and just brings it into a new sphere. So that's 4.5 stars for me.
Yeah, that's fair. My number 3. 3 and 2 were tough. Number 1 was quite easy. But number 3 and 2 were quite tough. My number 3 is going to be You're Living All Over Me. Yeah, this is a cool album. I remember when I first went into their discography, obviously I assumed this one would be my favorite because it's easily the most acclaimed album of theirs. And I think there is good reason for that in a lot of ways because it is, very influential. It is very cohesive. There's only 9 songs and none of them are, none of them overstay their welcome. And yeah, again, opening tracks, Little Fury Bugs is great, but it's probably only like my 3rd or 4th favorite song on the album. I think there are other stronger songs on here. Cracked, I think, is fantastic. Great energy. Lou Barlow is a beast on this album. Sludge Feast is a real romp of a track. Some great riffing going on there, as you would expect. The Lung, I really like the lyrics on that one. Kind of strange. There's a lot of really weird lyrics on this album, which I kind of dig. Sort of the theme of like the vulgarity that you get from looking at the album cover kind of translates into the lyrics, which is pretty cool. Raisins is another really cool track. Tar Pit kind of, again, brings shoegaze to mind before shoegaze was a thing, which is kind of cool. My favorite on the album by far is In a Jar, which that bass line is unbelievable. It is so good. It is such an infectious, catchy song. And again, like I think the Cure comparison in terms of their influences there, obviously they covered the Cure with the Just Like Heaven cover. And I think In a Jar is one of those songs that really, it reminds me of like a really dirty, grimy take on the Cure, which I think a couple of songs on an album that I am yet to mention also do. I think Lose is great. I think Polido is a lot better than Don't in terms of getting the apocalyptic closing track. And yeah, it's just a simply great album. It's one of these that is a mainstay of, 1001 albums you need to hear before you die. And I think that's just right. I think it's great. It's a high 4.5 stars. It's a big jump from 4 to 3 for me, because I think these 3 are the albums that I return to consistently. And it's probably not my favorite album of 87, but it'd be my top 5. Some good albums in 87. So yeah, I think it's great. No complaints. Other than it's not my preferred sound for them, even though it's a really cool sound.
For sure. That's not my number 1 of 87 either. It's actually, I have a ranking of every record that I give 4.5s to, and 87 tops at 4.5 for me. And my number 1 record is actually 1 spot above, which is Darklands by the Jesus and Mary Chain. That's 1 spot above in the overall ranking. And I'm about to talk about a record that I think is in my top 100 overall. My top 3 are all in my top 100. I think these records are exceptional. This one considerably further down the list than my top 2. And I'm about to make Tom cry because I'm talking about Where You Been. This is an incredible step up from Green Mine, the record directly before it. Notably, the whole record to me just has a lot more character. Everything feels a lot more pronounced, a lot more energized, and it's just a much better listening experience overall, if I had to say. I just prefer this crop of songs. Cuts like Start Chopping, What Else Is New, On the Way, Drawings, Going Home, I Ain't Staying are all just exceptional. And Jay starts to play with his vocals a lot more here, utilizing a lot more falsetto. And while it kind of sounds terrible, it works for their sound. Up to this point, it's also their most stylistically diverse record. Songs like Not the Same, On the Way, and I Ain't Staying are pretty different from a lot of other ones that they had beforehand. And up to the point to which this was released, this was the best collection of tracks by Dinosaur Jr. It combines a lot of what made the band great on all the previous records while fully embracing this heavy sort of alternative rock that they were treading in. And I could be wrong, but I think this is the only 90s record by them where it actually had all three of the members playing on it. I could be wrong about that, but oh well. Regardless, great record. 4.5 stars. Somewhere in my top 150 overall.
I don't think Blue Barlow was on any of the 90s albums.
I, I'm probably wrong about that. I
But
thought I read it somewhere. I think I just read it on the Wikipedia or something.
I'll have to go back and double check. That was my impression, but maybe I'm wrong. So my number 3 is Hand It Over, which it took me a little bit to get this one. The first time I heard it, I was like, okay, I don't get why everybody loves this one, or everybody in our sphere loves this one so much. But then when I went back to it, I was like, oh, okay, yeah, I get this now. It's a really cool album, kind of unexpectedly, just given what I'd always read about it and heard about it. I do think that Alone is kind of like the centerpiece of the album, though. It's really, really what kind of ties it all together. It's such a cool song. It's got such a cool atmosphere, and just the emotion he brings on that song is just you really feel what he's feeling there with all the with just the swirling sounds and just everything about it. So yeah, I feel like on that song, like the guitars, they almost feel like they crush you at points, like just to go with the lyrical themes, like just the loneliness of it. I think that Getting Rough is cool with the countryish tinge to it. I actually noted that I really liked the trumpets on I'm Insane, that it elevated the song for me. So that's kind of funny. And also, like, I just found there's lots of interesting sounds and flourishes throughout the albums, or throughout the album. Just like on "Can't We Move This," I'm not sure what the sound was, if it was keyboards or mellotron or strings, but it really added to that song. And yeah, just think it's overall a better album than the previous one. Like we said, without a sound was a bit disappointing, but this one definitely brought things back up. So 4.5 on that.
Yeah, echo a lot of your thoughts apart from the trumpet. So my number 2 is going to be Green Mind. No surprise to you two, I don't think. I think this is a stellar album. Again, this is the one where the influence of sort of the 80s pop music comes into it. It's so much cleaner and more accessible than Bug and You're Living All Over Me, and obviously Dinosaur. Most things are. And what I find really cool about this is that it has the same thing as Bug, where it opens with easily my favorite song, In the Wagon. I think that is just an absolute powerhouse of the song. The backing vocals, there's like 4 different hooks in the song. It's amazing. It's probably my second favorite Dinosaur Jr. song. But unlike in Bug, it does not overshadow the rest of the album because there are some other fantastic songs on here. Puke and Cry as well, I noted, is a really cool song. Love the drums on it. Blowing It is really rowdy, and I love how it transitions into I Live for That Look, which is definitely their most Cure-inspired song. I could almost imagine Robert Smith singing that song. That's how much it reminds me of The Cure. And yeah, Flying Cloud, again, reminds me of Neil Young. How'd You Pin That On Me? The only song that really has the remnants of their punk influence on the album. And that's nice. It sort of provides something a bit different. I like Water. It's probably my least favorite on the album because it runs a little bit long. I think Muck is great because it's so different for the band. It's a change of pace in the sequencing and the hold backing vocals. So good, so infectious. Thumb is great, probably the best showcase of Jay's guitar on the album. I remember the first time I heard this album was when Dinosaur Jr. really sort of hit me as like, these could be one of my favorite bands. I heard Living All Over Me, I loved it obviously, but this was something completely different and a bit more in my wheelhouse, you know. I also note the title track is a cool way to close out another one where I thought the drums stood out. And that, yeah, they're just pulling from a number of influences. It's a really fun listen all the way through. I've listened to it like 4 or 5 times all the way through just because I love just chucking it on because it's a fun listen. And where my number 1 is a bit darker and a bit more, you know, I don't know, it's a bit less poppy, I would say, than this one. This one is one that I can reliably chuck on like an old friend, even though it's only listened to it this year. So, yeah, Green Mind is my number 2, like this close to 5 stars, but we're sticking at 4.5.
I'm at 5 stars, just so you know. And I'm at a little bit more than 5 stars. Both my top 2 are in my top 20 records overall. I think that these are both utterly exceptional. I think Rate Your Music is fucking absurd because this is the bottom 2 on Rate Your Music. Damn buffoons, I say. And just one note on Green Mine, I don't dislike it. I think that it's very good. I have literally every song on it liked past Muck. I just don't like the production. If it was produced like Where You Been, it could probably be my number 3.
That's what I like about it. The production is like a lot more clean, and it sort of leans into the melody and the pop stuff that they were being influenced by at the time. And I think that's what works about it. It's different. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It just sort of comes across a little thin to me. Like they sort of lack that weight that some of their other stuff has. And that's kind of an issue with some stuff in the 80s just in general. So it's not their fault. It's just an issue with style for me. And I'm going to make Tom real happy. My number 2, this was so close. And now I'm going to switch it back. Never mind. 2 is Without a Sound. It's so close. Literally, these 2 records are like my 13 and my 14 all time. So it's like, I think that they're both exceptional. And I'm not entirely sure what draws me onto this record so much. I think sonically, it's just absolutely fantastic. It's stepping into something a lot more accessible, but it still has a lot of the punch, which was kind of my issue on Green Mind. I think that this is a very similar record to that, but it's closer produced to Where You've Been. So I think it has a lot of weight, a lot of punch to the record still, but it doesn't lack in the songs. Feel the Pain is just absolutely tremendous. I think this is Jay's best vocal record overall, which I know you don't really agree to. As much as I love Where You've Been, that might be one of his worst vocal records. He doesn't sound bad, but it kind of plays into that record. But on here, he just has he has a great balance of whenever he's like really energized and he's kind of just slacking around. It hits like a perfect median to me. I think that he just sounds exceptional. And every song here for me, I keep saying that a lot. This is the perfect sort of Dinosaur Jr. formula. It has enough of the sort of poppy, hook-driven material that was on Green Mind, but it also has some of the darker, more sinister stuff that you can maybe see on Where You've Been. And I don't really care about this band lyrically speaking. It's kind of hard to when you have stuff like Lou Barlow and Jay Mascis just going crazy across all these songs. But this is a record that connects with me lyrically for whatever reason. I think it's really one of a kind. It's my second favorite record of 1994 and pretty easily 5 stars for me.
1994 is an amazing year, so it makes sense that you have 2 in your top 15.
Yeah, 94 is exceptional. The only record I have above it is the Blue Album, and it's like right neck and neck with the Blue Album.
So that's also my number 2. I actually was pretty excited by this album. Like I don't know that I was expecting it. I just feel like they really advanced their sound on this album. They did so many different things on it. They added different flourishes to it. I just thought that every song was really exciting to hear, which I think is what made the next album kind of a bit more of a letdown, because I was so excited by this album that I was kind of expecting them to kind of do not something similar, but sort of stay on a similar track in that kind of vein, I guess. But I keep saying in my notes, like, nails the vibe of the 90s for a lot of these albums, because for me when I hear them it's like it takes me back to that time period. Like it just sounds like what I picture that time to be like. And I just really like a lot of the songs on here. I really liked the different sound on Not the Same. Like it's totally different vibe. It's a slower song, there's some strings there, it's so pretty. Like I just wasn't expecting that from them at that point, I don't think so. It was a bit of a surprise, and I just really enjoyed that. There's some great female backing vocals on Get Me, and I thought that was cool. Really liked that. And yeah, just there's just so many different sounds on it. Just it's an exciting album. One that I would definitely go back to and that I would love to buy and own for my collection. So that's saying something. And yeah, it was a great surprise, great discovery. I probably would have never listened to it if not for doing this, just because I stayed away from those albums for whatever reason. So I'm glad that I opened my mind and checked everything out, because I was really missing out. This is 5 stars for sure.
Okay, so you said that you agreed with me, but wasn't Without a Sound your number 8?
Yeah, you were talking about Where You Been, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, what?
Yeah.
You don't agree with me? What the heck? No, it's fine. It's fine. I don't really care.
But yeah, good choice. It's my number 1, as you will have figured out. 5 stars. It's in my top 20 of all time. It's probably in my top 5 of the 90s, which is neck and neck with the 70s for my favorite decade. And I just can't get enough of this album. I sort of mentioned like that my 2 favorite Dinosaur Jr. songs on this album, but this probably has like 5 of the top 10 because it starts with Out There, which is just an incredible opening track. The way the guitar sort of replicates the sound of a revving motorcycle partway through that song, that's just amazing. Like, it's so corny, but it works so well in the context of the song. And again, it's a really emotional track, really memorable chorus, and the bells that come in are really sweet too. Start Chopping is the best song on the album. It's perfect. That opening riff is absolutely infectious. I can't get enough of it. I'd say my favorite moment in the whole discography is the first like 20 seconds of Start Chopping, because it just gets me so in the mood. What Else Is New is probably the saddest song on the album. This album deals with a lot of more like darker tones than Green Mind. It's sort of like, it's weird because it came after Green Mind, but it's like a marriage of You're Living All Over Me and Green Mind to me. It's sort of like the perfect middle ground for them. And then, yeah, I'd probably say that's also Jay's best vocal on that song on What Else Is New, which obviously contradicts the comment made earlier. I think the opening 3-track run could match up with any album for me, to be honest. I think it's just unbelievable. On the Way is a great energy pickup after that slower song. And then Not the Same, obviously, great atmosphere to that song. Get Me is absolutely fantastic. The female backing vocals add so much. And then the second half of that song is just so cathartic. Drawings is a bit weaker, but it's still, it's only in comparison to the first 6 songs, which are all sublime. Hide is a cool track, great drumming and bass on it. Going Home steps back up again and is probably on the same level as all the songs on the A side. I Ain't Saying, fantastic closer. The guitar tone is spot on. And really, I just say that this album is everything that I want in an alternative rock album, to be honest. I think this is like the pinnacle of that sort of 90s style of music of the alt rock, and I think they really nailed it. It's got enough there that you listen to Dinosaur Jr., but I think it's still unique sonically because it is this dark album, a lot darker than anything they would do after this. That's for sure. But also, it's got the lovely strings on a lot of songs and the female backing vocals, and it's just that perfect marriage of all the different things that make them great. So, yeah, Where You Been is my number 1, pretty easily 5 stars.
Yeah, I don't agree with the vocal thing. I don't think he sounds bad, mind you. It's just something about how he's utilizing his voice on that record it's not my favorite.
I think you nailed it though. It's like he's playing into it more on this album, and if you like him singer in the first place, you're probably going to enjoy him playing into it. And I do like him.
Well, you were talking about a top 5 record of the 90s. It's time for me to talk about the best record of the 90s. I'm going to be talking about Hand It Over. This is so tight between this and Without a Sound for me. I do not comprehend how these records are sort of admonished by the larger Dinosaur Jr. community. So let's get this out of the way. This is their most experimental, is sort of the best term about it. It's their weirdest, notably less distorted, a much sort of cleaner guitar tone, and a lot of added instrumentation, a lot more acoustic and horn work on this record compared to any of the other ones. And it lends to have this record having such a unique and just interesting feel overall, but it still has so many of the signature Dinosaur Jr. elements. Very similar to Without a Sound, I think that this is, again, one of Jay's best vocal performances. He just sounds amazing on every song. My favorite song here has to be Getting Rough. I'm a sucker for this sort of country, sort of rocky sort of thing. I just think that it's absolutely tremendous. And I don't have a ton to say about it because I just think that this is an impeccably consistent record. I can't think of a better set of songs from this time period. Some of the band's best performances and their most unique batch of anything. Uh, Obviously, like without a sound, it's 5 stars. It doesn't quite break into like my top 10 overall, but being the best of an entire decade isn't that. It's not like it's that bad if it doesn't get into my top 10 ever. I don't really care that much about the 90s. Yeah, this record is just utterly tremendous, and I do not fathom how people think this is their worst or near it.
Yeah, those people are crazy.
Yeah,
Straight
they're
up
far
loonies.
from their worst, for sure. So I guess my number one is obvious. It's You're Living All Over Me. That's the one that's been with me the longest, so it kind of makes sense. It opens with my favorite song of theirs, bar none, Little Fury Things. Love that song. The first time I heard that song years ago, it like knocked me on my ass. Basically, I just loved it, and I couldn't get enough of it for a very long time. But I feel like the whole album, like I guess when I'm not listening to it, I kind of forget how much I love all these songs because as I was going through it, it was like, oh yeah, I love this one. Oh yeah, every song. Like it was just like basically that way till the end. I mean, the last song isn't as great and as immediate as some of those other songs, but I still like it and it still works for me. So it doesn't knock the album down enough to take away from all those other great songs on it. Um, in a Jar, of course, classic, great song. But I mean, I could say that about pretty well all these songs. Like, just always an excitement when I hear this album. It always takes me back to when I first discovered it and how into it I was. So it wasn't really a surprise for me that it was my number one. I was kind of expecting that, but I was hoping to maybe switch it up because I know it's like the basic choice to go with that one as the number one. But it is what it is. So that's a 5 star album for me. It's like I don't even know what else to really say about it. I just really love it. Love every song. Great time.
It's okay. It wasn't surprising to us either. We both agreed that we were pretty set that that was your number one.
I
As soon
figured.
as you agreed to join the video.
I'm happy that
Yeah.
you got another 5 star though, and
Yeah,
especially it was the right one, so that's good.
I
Yeah.
give the right 2 5 stars. Don't be silly. It's okay. One of these days, people will realize I'm right, but I'll have to continue waiting. Alrighty. Any closing thoughts on Dinosaur Jr. overall, you two?
Yeah, I think they are kick ass. They are a really cool band. Jay Mask is probably my favorite guitar player ever, bar anyone. I think like there's just something about his tone and the way he plays. It just gets a lot of feel, a lot of emotion from his playing, and his songwriting is really great as well. Like a lot of these songs. Like again, I listened to was it 8 of these? I'd listened to 8 of them in the past, and I came back to them, and I remembered most of the songs from those 8 albums, which is like that's saying something about how good he is at writing hooks. And I do think the lyrics are pretty cool, especially like yeah, you're living all over me, like in a jar being about collecting scabs. It's like these really vulgar topics to sing about kind of fits with the vibe of the album, and then it's still really melodic somehow. So yeah, I think the lyrics are perfectly fitting for each album, is what I'd say. And yeah, they're probably in my top 50 artists of all time.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that they're somewhere in my top 40, not entirely sure where. Probably on the lower end. Because if I really think about them realistically, I'm probably only ever going to go back to like my top 6 and I'll just sort of trash the rest. Not that they're bad records, but it's just like when you have such high peaks as what I feel your top 6 are, I don't really need the rest. Like you're saying about Jay Mascis, he's an exceptional player. He's probably somewhere in my top 3. Top 3, if I have to say off the top of my head. I don't care too much about players overall. For me, it's more about the overall. But ones that really just get to me, Nels Klein and solo stuff from Wilco, just fantastic. I'm gonna start gushing about him now because I don't know when I'm gonna record this episode, and I need to do it. I want to talk about this band so much. I'm talking about Bill Nelson from Bebop Deluxe. can't get enough of him. And yeah, Jay Mascis, just really fantastic player overall. His writing is really interesting for the band as well, even if I don't really care because it's Dinosaur Jr. But yeah, really, really a strong band overall, and not really a ton of low points.
So my Dinosaur Jr. stock has gone way up from this listen. I mean, I always liked them, but I only know a few albums. I just never really went beyond that. So couldn't really call them a top artist at that point. And I don't know if they'll still, there's a lot of artists that I love. I haven't done that top artist list, and I don't know. I can't really say just yet where they'll fall, but they're definitely way higher up than they ever were before. And like, and it's exciting because I feel like there's all these new albums that I had no idea that I was gonna love, that were just there waiting for me to discover them. Like I was saying earlier, I had everything up to hand it over on my computer for probably for the last 15 years, but I just didn't bother with a bunch of them, which is a shame. So like, yeah, this was a great experience. I'm glad I did it. I'm glad that I know the truth now.
No problem. It's kind of surprising to me because this doesn't really make that much sense, but two bands that I kind of view similarly, because you're a really big Pixies fan, I kind of get a little bit of the sort of, they're not really that similar, but I kind of view them in a similar light. Would make sense why you would like be into Dinosaur Jr. if you're into Pixies as much as you are.
Well, they're the same era. Like
Yeah.
it would make sense for me to be into a lot more just based on everything else that I was into. And that's around the time that I got into those first few albums. But I think the viewpoint was that it was only those first, or those two albums, Bug and You're Living All Over Me, not first two albums, but only those two that were the ones that were really relevant at that time. Well, that's the viewpoint that I had. So that's why those were the only ones I really bothered with, which again, that we know that now that is very wrong, but it is what it is, right? So I just never went into the 90s because, like I said, I went into being more of a Lou stan at that point, and I was more into Sebadoh, and I just, for whatever reason, had this blockage against the Jay Mascis stuff. I don't know. Again, why? Can't remember, but
it's kind of like whenever Uncle Tupelo broke up and people were picking sides between Jay Farrar and Jeff Tweedy.
Yeah, kind of a similar thing.
Yeah. I figure I'll ask because I mentioned it earlier. Tom, do you like Dinosaur Jr. or Death Cab more?
Death Cab, pretty comfortably.
Vanessa, who do you like more, Fiona Apple or Dinosaur Jr.?
Dinosaur Jr.
Who do you like more, Dinosaur Jr. or Tori Amos?
Tori.
Okay, good. Two easy options.
That's the thing about Tori is interesting. I mean, this is totally off topic, but she has a lot of albums that are great though. So that would make it hard. I don't know. Because those first four are like all 5 stars for me. They're huge for me, but a lot of her 2000 stuff, not so much. So I don't know.
I only know 2 of her.
That's a harder question than I thought.
Yeah, I only know 2 of her records, and I haven't been totally wowed yet. One makes sense, the other is Little Earthquakes, so I know I'm wrong. Yeah,
I like Little Earthquakes. It's definitely
I think it's good.
UD era, you know.
But very reminiscent of Kate Bush at points for me. Well, anyway. Alrighty. Well, anyways, this was a ton of fun. We've been talking about this episode for at least like a month now, and it's nice to finally have it complete. We probably took way too much time, but that's okay. I hope that everybody who's watching enjoys, because we're going to be talking about a band that nobody likes next. Well, they aren't, because they're sane. However, me, editor Camden, and another friend of ours, Clay, are going to be talking about the discography of 21 Pilots, the band that got me into music. Expect me to be very biased and very unhappy with the scores I am going to give. With that being said, I hope you all have a great one, and I really hope that you enjoyed our brief discussion of the Dinosaur Jr. records. Have a great one.